December 2nd, the Lord woke me up early and took me into a prophetic encounter. And again, I'm just going to give this to you, kind of raw and unfiltered, just, as I got it that morning. And he said, Barry, we're in a serious hour. He said, the enemy is throwing everything at you, but do not be discouraged. In fact, rejoice. Have I not said that these things would happen? And have I not said that I would be with you? So do not fear, for I am with you. I will not leave you or forsake you, for you are mine and I am yours. Barry, tell my people that there are some dark days ahead, but you shall overcome. And then, Steve, I was taken into the spirit, and I can say that I don't know if I was in the body or if I was out of the body. I do not know. Yeah. It was very real, and I was right there in this moment. And I was in a military helicopter, and we were flying in formation with a few other helicopters around us. And we were flying quite low through a valley in the foothills, and there were some mountains in the background, and the surrounding area, and it was definitely rugged, Canadian territory. There were trees as far as I could see. There were some creeks and very rugged terrain. It was difficult to access, and it wasn't like this was a commonly traveled area for public access. This was kind of too far out there. And so as we're flying in these helicopters, and I could see in the distance, some buildings. And as we approached and we got closer and closer, it appeared to me that there was actually like a military base camp. And as we flew closer to the camp, it was evident that, there were Canadian troops on the ground, but it was actually more than that. And as we got in, I could see that, there were a measure of Canadians in this camp, but probably 80% of them were Chinese troops, from, one of the biggest continents, that we've got.
Yeah.
And, if you kind of know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the camp was a significant size. And, it had barracks set up. And to me, it appeared like there'd been, maybe about 3,000 men and women on the ground. And they were on standby. They were kind of waiting for mobilization. And then, I was taken and I was shown like a satellite view of Canada, coast to coast. And I could see highlighted, across the land, there were similar camps that were set up throughout the nation. There were a few in British Columbia, up on the northern coastline, just off the lower mainland. There were, off Vancouver. There were a few in the interior. And, there were others that were staging areas that they were undercover operations, but they were hidden in plain sight. And it was even like they'd had commercial buildings that were set up within cities where they had, activities, going on. And like I say, they were hidden in plain sight. Now, as I moved west, there were some through the prairies, and there was actually several along the Canadian-American border, kind of sporadically here and there, that seemed like they were more underground, bunker style, places. And Quebec and Ontario, they had several kind of in the lower, southern region, a few kind of mid, and then on the East Coast, there were, a gate in Newfoundland. And so, I'm looking at this and, I was shocked to see actually, what was going on. And the Lord said, Barry, tell my people that there is a push coming against them from within, but they will not prevail.
That's a really good word right there.
They've been compromised. Many men and women in high places of authority but it's not too late for them to deal with things at hand. Many were framed, many were set up. Some were threatened with outright lies and threats. And I was taken into the spirit again, and I was taken from location to location, province by province, building by building, office by office. And the Lord would take me into these buildings, and I would see, and you see people mulling about and, in their desks and doing their business. But I saw that there were men in black in every provincial legislature. And they were controlling premiers and governments. And in Ottawa, I was taken into Parliament, and behind closed doors in the highest offices, there was a half a dozen of these guys there, and they seemed to be the ones that were kind of really in power. And they were like mercenaries. They were cold. They were heartless. I can just say they were full of evil. Emotionally, they were just kind of dead. They were ruthless in their tactics, and they were professional at what they were trained in. And it was like their consciences were seared, and they were just blinded, kind of to the evil that, they were about. They had little respect for life, and they would do what they would have to do in a heartbeat. And they invoked a fear on the people that was just straight from the pit of hell. I could see even the RCMP commissioner's office was also controlled by these guys. They were told what to do and how to do it. The commissioner was only a figurehead. All integrity lost.
Wow.
I saw it in the spirit. There was a funnel of money that was being dumped into the Supreme Court and into the justice system. And there was money being funneled into judges to buy them off and to turn them, the other way. And I saw perversion in these closed chambers with men and women and, children being used in awful ways for their own pleasures. And, many in this system had sold themselves out in the enemy's camp, in perversions of all sorts. And then I was taken into another, portion where I saw these communication towers and these satellite dishes, and they were pure black. And everything that they transmitted was dark and driven by evil to control the masses. And they were all synchronized, repeating the same evil narrative of fear across the nation. And the general media platforms, they were under control again by certain global powers and principalities to basically manipulate things in a dark way. And I was thinking, and I was showing like an emergency news broadcast, and it was like watching the news, and I saw a financial market report being given on the news, and they had a graph on the screen, and they were talking about it, and it was inflation and how inflation had just skyrocketed over the period of just a few short months. And then I was taken into a stock market trading floor. I was right in there, and they had the big screens going and the tickers, and there were papers all over the floor. It was scattered around, and the tension in there was extremely intense. And I saw the stock market crash, and the news it basically had a graph where things just crashed, and it was a global, like it wasn't just one nation. It was like once one went, they all started to go. It was a global crash. And I saw these stock brokers, they were on the floor, and some of them had lost it all, and then more, and then some. And there was suicidal rampant thoughts, and because people couldn't deal with what was happening, they couldn't cope, and they saw no way out. Then I was taken into a grocery store, and basically, wandering through this grocery store, I saw the freezers were bare, the shelves were bare. Freezer, there was, maybe a few things in there, but basically, not much. And there was a black market supply that had kind of lit up just for those that were trying to survive. So at that point, I was taken into a back office where there was Justin Trudeau.
Wow.
And I saw Justin, and he almost seemed to be like happy, like frolicking with pleasure behind the scenes, and just kind of almost honestly seemed out of his mind, out of his own right mind. And
Wow.
And it seemed as the oppression and the depression increased, so did his control over the Canadian people. So at that point, I was taken into the city streets, and I was taken in, and I watched the discontent in the Canadian people begin to just this discontent rise up with them. And the tipping point had been hit. They began to take to the streets in masses. And, at this point, it actually was illegal outdoor gatherings and protests, because they changed the laws where the gatherings were now not permitted under the false pretenses to control the nation. Nevertheless, these people rose up and they gathered, pushing back on this evil global regime that was trying to dominate and control. So it took tremendous wisdom and insight for these leaders to be able to plan and to execute these meetings and these events. So they were underground planning. It just kind of became the norm in how they, had to kind of strategize to put these things together. So I watched as there were pockets of God's remnant starting to rise up and lead the way. And it was the Christians who were the most oppressed, and they were the greatest threat to the enemy. And they were given supernatural grace to execute the plans. So the ones that said, yes, we're going, we're in, we're doing it, they were given a supernatural protection. They were given resources. They were forced to lay aside their differences and past offenses so they could work together in love and unity for the kingdom and for the greater good. And even though the shaking was far worse and far greater than anyone could imagine, it was also a turning point for the nation. And it was clearly evident that this nation was about to turn to God like never before in history. Revival was and is imminent. There's about to be an outpouring through this nation that will expand the kingdom of God exponentially. Barry, tell my people, do not lose hope. It is time to engage, fully engage. I'm going to remove the scales from their eyes. I'm going to open up their ears to my truth. And I am going to wake up the masses. So get ready, take your positions, and prepare to receive them, for they are coming. A great awakening is being released, and it's going to be far greater than you've ever imagined. Hold your ground. Be bold and be strong in the power of my unfailing love. It's time for all hands on deck. The young, the old. Do not think that you can't do it. Surrender to me. Walk with me, and we will take back the land the enemy has stolen. And holy is the word of the Lord.